Hello, welcome to this episode of Creative Visions TV. Now, have any of you ever had the experience where you're somewhere and all of a sudden you hear your name called out? And when you turn around, nobody's there? And let's say that might have happened to somebody, not just once, but again and again through a period of years. What do you think about that? Would you explore that further and want to know more? Would you want to know, where did that disembodied voice come from? Who is it? And what happens along the way? You do see an apparition that is related to this voice. Well, my guest today has had that experience, that precise experience. We're going to have him talk to you about that too. Welcome to Creative Visions TV, and I'm your host, Karen Dahlman. So today we're going to be talking to David Dellman. Now I know it sounds like I'm saying Dahlman, which is my name, but I'm not. We're not related. It's David Dellman. Now, David had this experience we just talked about. And so that really compelled him and propelled him into a lifelong journey and exploration of metaphysics, because he had a lot of questions from this event. He said, who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And what happens when we die? So his life has been devoted many years searching these questions, which led him to a very diverse background encompassing three major traditions. Now this is really cool because he's putting together some things that don't normally go together, such as Wicca, Christianity, and spiritualism. And so he studied those three things very thoroughly in his life. And as a teenager, before he got started into all this, as a teenager, he had a really interesting dramatic conversion experience and began speaking in tongues. We'll have him tell us more about that as well. So he spent his early years in the Pentecostal tradition of the Assemblies of God. He attended seminary school there and became a full-time pastor. He graduated with a Master's of Divinity in 1985. He also received a second Master's in Education in 1997. And served as an HR director for a large company. So David does both. He does the left brain and the right brain. So it'll be very interesting to talk to him today about this. He started his studies in Wicca in 2004. Then he advanced his studies in spiritualism in 2010. And in 2011, you guys, he went to and visited and also studied at Lilydale, which is a spiritual community really well known in the state of New York. There's a few of those spiritualism communities that are still around in the United States, and this is one of the early ones. Now, what's really cool about David, he has an extensive, awesome collection of Ouija boards. And by the way, I met David Dellman because of WouijaCon. Now, we were both at WouijaCon. We didn't meet each other there. But when I came back from WouijaCon, I was doing some research, and I saw David's name that he was attending. I saw his website, which is a really, really cool website called vintageparanormal.com. And I found this website, and we became friends because of our love of the Ouija board. So we're going to see some of his boards today, too. Now, David doesn't necessarily use his boards because he's a medium, you guys. He's a medium. And he also works with tarot cards, and he also works with the pendulum, and he's got a pendulum board to show us as well. He's done a lot of studies in his developing his mediumistic abilities, and you got to remember now how it all started for him. At the age of 8, behind him, hearing a voice talk to him, and nobody was there. So that led him into this whole odyssey. David is also a published author. He has one book that came out already, and that's called The Mentor's Gift. And this is really a novel about a magician, a female magician coming to age and having to deal with making some hard decisions in life. And also the story deals a lot about forgiveness. Now he has a new book coming out this fall of 2017. And it's called The Christmas Garden. And this book is about a bicoastal romance. But the people involved in the romance are really wrestling with the issues of grief. And also the man in the relationship has a wife who's deceased, and he communicates with her. So we get into spiritual communication. And they try to work out their differences and their issues. So we have a lot to talk about today with David Dellman, so I don't want to wait any longer. So without further ado, we welcome David Dellman to the show. Welcome, David.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Hi, Karen.
So glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great. So you got it. Let's go back to that story when you heard that voice, and maybe tell a little bit more detail when you were at the age of 8, and this started you on this cool journey.
So as a child, I used to like to sit in the bedroom, stare out the window at people below. and kind of eavesdrop a little bit into their conversations, watch what was going on. I lived in a row home in Baltimore. And for anybody who's familiar with that, these homes are very close together. The backyards are close together. Everybody is kind of one big happy family. So maybe it's a little bit of an odd thing to do when you're 8 years old, but I enjoyed doing it. Sat there, and one evening, it was dusk, the sun was going down, and I heard conversation behind me, which isn't unusual for my household. My mother and dad entertained all the time, right up to the time, to the end, really. They always had people over the house. And so for me to hear conversation in the house is not unusual. But you sort of hear the ambient noise, the conversation in the background. But above that conversation, I heard my name called, which also wasn't unusual because sometimes my mother would call me, my father would call me, or somebody else would. So I turned around, nobody was there. I ran to the house, nobody was in the house. One of the neighbors came over to sit on the front porch to make sure that nothing happened because my parents and brother had gone out. So the house was empty. So I had to start thinking about who was it that spoke to me. It was years later that I found out who it was. But at the time, it was a little bit unnerving. I didn't know anything about clairaudience. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know about spirit contact or spirit communication. So it was just one of those things that came out of the blue. And the conversation I was listening to that wasn't there, I'm not sure who those voices were. But yeah, years later, I would find out that we all have spirit people. And this was one of those spirit persons reaching out to me. And she would later identify herself. And then a medium in Lilydale would help me identify exactly what kind of relationship I had with this person.
And you also saw her reflection, if I recall, when you were walking through a town in a window.
Ellicott City. Those familiar with Baltimore and the surrounding towns, Ellicott City is one of the surrounding towns around Baltimore. And it's known for its spiritual presence. There's some hauntings in the area. Really, some people speculate it's because of the stone that the town is made of. It's an historic town, but it's if you walk through Ellicott City, it's one of those places that has a vibration. So it's almost a natural conduit to the other side. So, and I love spending time in Ellicott City. And yeah, I kind of got a glimpse of her in Ellicott City. So I sort of got to know what she looks like. It was really, though, there's a book called Meet and Work with Spirit Guides. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
No, I don't know that book.
Yeah, let me, I have that book right here.
Oh, show it to us, yeah.
That's by Ted Andrews.
Andrews. Wonderful. Interesting.
He's got some exercises in his book, and doing those brought her home to me. Now, I to this day, I like to get confirmation. And I get confirmation in a couple of ways. We've talked about the pendulum and the Ouija board, but I also like to reach out to mediums that I know. And there are a couple of mediums that if you take a picture of yourself, a selfie, send it to them, they will draw your spirit guides.
Oh, how cool is
that?
If
you have some sense of what your spirit guides look like and who your spirit guides are, it's a confirmation. So I did this. I reached out to one of these mediums. I took a selfie, sent it to her. And that's all the information I gave her. Okay, I didn't tell her.
Selfie.
Yeah, I didn't tell her who the person was. I didn't tell her what I was looking for. I sent this image down, and she sends me back a drawing of my primary guide.
Wow.
And it was exactly the person. When I did the Ted Andrews exercises and I met my guide, it was exactly that same person. So it's been a wonderful journey as far as she's concerned.
Well, David, this brings me to a good point here, or what you're talking about. In this channel, we talk a lot about how to connect with your spirit guides. What is one way you could share with them that would help people that are watching to be able to connect with their spirit guides more clearly?
Well, in the Ted Andrews book, this is kind of his exercise.
Okay, that's fine.
You can't see this here, but right out this window is my backyard, which is a lovely place. It's a wooded area. In the spring and summer, it's serene, it's peaceful, it's quiet. So I spend a lot of time out there meditating and reading. So I'm out there reading this book, and he talks about visualizing, just sitting still, getting into a meditative state, and calling for that person to come forward. Now, I think a lot of people initially, when you start doing this, it's easy to think, oh, this is my imagination.
Right.
The thing is, though, spirit works through imagination. Spirit works through the faculty of our imagination.
Yes.
So that's why, that's why I reach out to third parties to get confirmation. As I mentioned, the medium who draws images.
Yes.
Because when I sat there on the porch and I imagined and I saw this person present herself to me, I could clearly see who she was, every feature, every detail down to her clothing. But I wanted confirmation. That's why I reached out to the medium for a drawing. And when she sent the exact same drawing that I saw, there was no longer room for doubt.
See, and then you get that validation that you're like, yeah, this is working. Your imagination is your gateway into the other realms, and and then you're able to trust it more. So when you do your mediumship readings, is that the faculty you use the most, would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want everybody to hear this.
Over time, the more accuracies you get, and of course you get misses, but the more times you hit accurately, you learn to discern between, okay, that's really, I'm really coloring that. In other words, I'm influencing that myself, or that's a genuine message. And the more you do it, the clearer it becomes.
That's wonderful. And I think, too, I like that you go out in your backyard, which is beautiful for you. It's a sanctuary. When I go outdoors, too, it's like a sanctuary. I call it a vortex. And I'm telling you, it's where I write my best books is outdoors. And it's also where I get most clarity, and I can automatic write the best. I do Ouija well anywhere, so that's not an issue. But allowing my imagination to work, and also when I voice channel, I like to be in a place where it's beautiful and ambiance, because it supports that, doesn't it? The sights, the smells, the feelings, whatever you could do to augment yourself. We talk about that a lot on this channel, David.
Absolutely does.
So let's talk about your conversion you had. You had this incredible thing happen to you in your teenage years, which left you talking in tongues. Right.
This is Christianity now we're moving into, and there's a lot of when we talk religion or religious ideology, there's Christianity and there's Wicca and there's spiritualism, and it seems like these religions might not gel necessarily, and of course certainly on the Orthodox level they don't. But personally, one of my heroes is Madame Blavatsky.
Oh yes.
She always said, my religion is truth. In other words, I don't really care where a precept or an idea or a practice comes from, as long as it's true, as long as it works for me. That was her position, and she really didn't say, well, it's that religion or this religion. It's just whatever came and worked for her, she embraced. I had difficult teenage years, and I not to get too negative, but I gave God an ultimatum. And I said, you have 1 week to reveal yourself to me. And of course, I was going to be open, but I had my doubts. I was raised in Christianity. But there's a difference between Christianity as a religion, as a dogma, and Christianity as a living, breathing faith, as there is in anything.
Absolutely.
And so I was at a point of crisis. I was 14 years old, where I thought everything that I had been taught up to that point must be a lie. And the reason I came to that, in school we were studying the Holocaust, and they were showing us films of what took place in Germany. And I began to think, now people of faith that lived through that, it tended to, I remember there was a writing on the wall in Auschwitz that said, I believe in the sun, even when it doesn't shine. I believe in God, even when he doesn't speak. So there were people who lived through that, whose faith was strengthened. But for me, it was a crisis. I began to think, if this kind of atrocity can happen at any point in history, does God truly exist? And if not, then what is the meaning of life? Where are we going? Who are we? All these questions. And so it was a point of crisis. And I gave God this ultimatum. That night I had a dream, and the dream was I was in a room. It was decayed. It was old. You looked out the window. It was urban decay would be an apt description. But when I stepped through a door into a garden, and it was beautiful and lovely, and everything was fresh and new and vibrant in springtime. And I interpreted that as life and death.
Oh, nice.
But by that Friday, I'd had an experience that convinced me that it wasn't so much life and death as the experience of God versus life without. I was at the time I was studying Taekwondo, and my instructor was a Christian, and he was going to a Christian Bible study. By Christian, I'm talking about the charismatic tradition as distinct from the Pentecostal tradition.
Okay.
In the 1960s and 70s, a lot of mainstream traditions were experiencing an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, healings, miracles, these types of things. Catholics leading the way, Episcopalians, Baptists. So this was a charismatic church, and it was a youth group, and he brought me to the youth group, and I had an experience of God, and it completely changed my life. From that point on, I wanted to do nothing more than serve, and that's why I went to seminary.
Yes. And
it was really a crisis after seminary that got me looking in other directions.
But what made you go to Pentecostal? Because that seems like that was a religion that you really affiliated with, and you studied.
Right. Well, the church that was responsible for that conversion experience at 14 was a Baptist charismatic church.
Okay.
My parents were going to a mainstream tradition. Lutheranism is where they were.
Oh, okay.
And I was very happy to be a Baptist charismatic. The pastoral staff thought it was a little, 14-year-old kid coming to their church without parents. What's all this about?
Right.
So they reached out to my parents. Members of the church reached out to my parents. And when they finally started understanding what my experience was for themselves, they decided that the church I attended was too radical for them. The worship experience at the Baptist Charismatic Church, there's a lot of speaking in tongues. There was a lot of spontaneous manifestations. If you weren't used to that, it can be very unnerving.
Do you want to explain speaking in tongues? Not everybody may understand what that means. So maybe you should talk about that a little bit.
Speaking in tongues, it depends on who you ask. Now, recently, with my Morris Pratt studies, and we can talk about that also.
Right.
I found out that mediums have been speaking in tongues for years longer than Pentecostals. Yeah. So speaking in tongues is a type of channeling. So you're bringing a spirit through, and it's speaking in a language that's unknown to you.
I think what you're seeing a lot, what we're seeing a lot in more of this metaphysical movement, New Age movement, is people doing light language, they call it, and they're now speaking extraterrestrial languages. I've heard a lot of people do that. So it's very similar to channeling and bringing in a whole new language.
Yes, charismatics call it angelic languages.
Exactly. There you go. It's from the angels.
Yeah. So it depends, whatever you want to call it. But the idea is that you aren't consciously aware of the language you're speaking.
Right.
But there's a faith-based relationship in which you believe that what you are channeling or what you are praying is for the greater good for you and for everybody else. So it's a kind of meditation. I still, to this day, I speak in tongues every single day. I do morning meditation and prayer, and it's very much a vital part of that. For me, it's something that helps me align with the proper state of mind or resonance to commune with spirit. So it's a vital part. Yeah, I don't speak in tongues publicly.
Right.
But privately, it's very much a part of my personal meditation.
Would you say that's also a way that you tap into the energy and raise your vibration so you can get into the meditation deeper?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can sense that. So people, this is great because we all have different ways to get into the higher vibrations or the intentions of what you want to attract to you. And we talk about this, David, with the board, that the intentions really matter. And so if it's some kind of ritual, speaking in tongues, meditating, before you use these tools, do that if that's going to raise your vibration. This is just another technique. And I love the way you explain it, David, because when I was growing up, I was brought up in the Catholic tradition. And when somebody spoke in tongues, it was like, that person's possessed. As a kid, what's going on? It wasn't really explained as beautifully as you just explained it. Now, I'm super curious here. Here you are studying Pentecostal. You go to the tradition. You speak in tongues. You become a pastor. You get your get your degree in Doctor of Divinity or Master's of Divinity, and then you start studying Wicca. Explain that transition. Oh, and by the way, you guys, my cat's saying hello. That's Panzer. You guys know him.
Nice.
He's saying hi, David.
Very good. Very good.
Well, come on up here and join us.
That's an interesting transition. It was about 2004 when I discovered a subculture. You might be familiar with it, Goth.
Oh, yes.
Goth. Okay.
Yeah,
so
we all remember Goth.
There's a subculture within the subculture, the Christian Goth community. And I had no idea that these people existed. Everybody knew about Goth. I mean, they were everywhere. But the subculture of the Christian community within it was a hidden thing to me. When I discovered it, it was an amazing experience. I actually produced a couple of conventions for the Christian Goth community. But some of my friends within that community had been exposed to Wicca. And and of course their testimony was, I was doing this and now I'm not. But I started studying to sort of get a handle on what their background was and what their experience was. But what I discovered was entirely different than what I was hearing. And what I discovered was something that was vibrant and alive and worth taking a closer look at, that has made a positive contribution to my life ever since, in many different ways. My teacher for many years was someone who has a very strong internet presence, Victoria David Dellman. She has an internet school called Seasons in Avalon. Another great teacher that I highly recommend is Janet Farrar. She's currently living in Ireland.
And this is all for Wicca?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, these are great teachers. I'm not sure necessarily that they would identify with Wicca, although they probably would. They're witches.
Yeah. Now, would you say you're a witch or a warlock too?
Some people make a distinction between Wicca and witchcraft. I don't.
Okay.
So to me, their witchcraft is a craft, and it can fit into just about any religion. Wicca is more a religious system, but those were my two primary influences, and the Sabbats have become a very important part of my life, celebrating the Sabbats, and also just becoming in tune with the energies around me. I think that's very important. I think to go through life and not develop an awareness of the energies around you, whether they're seasonal or they're lunar or whatever the energy might be, you're missing out on a whole chunk of life.
Yes.
So to me, that's the contribution Wicca can make to the rest of us.
Oh, that's beautiful. Hey. It's very cyclical, like you mentioned. It works with the energies of the earth. It's earthy. When I think of Wicca, I think of being grounded and working with the different elements. And so I love what you're saying about that, because again, this is a way to step into the vibrations and start stepping into other dimensions. We talk a lot in this channel about how to work with and navigate and maneuver within these other dimensions. And this is one way to start doing it. I fully hear what you're saying. That's why I so appreciate Wicca as well. Although I'm not a student of it, people ask me this all the time. And maybe I'm a witch in a closet or something. But I have a broom in the closet. But no, it's just that I love the spirituality of it. And I think, David, for those reasons, I'm very much attracted to Native American spirituality, because it's very earth-centered as well with these elements, as you're talking about.
No, I love Native American spirituality. And I spent a lot of time visiting powwows and participating in that, and it's a beautiful thing. And there are similarities, certainly.
Yeah, and that's what I found. So that's probably more my thing. And I had brought with me today a tarot card. I'll just show you real quickly. We're going to talk about tarot here in a little bit, but because he got into tarot around the same time he got into Wicca. And mine's called it looks like this in the back. It's the Native American tarot. And so I can't really see it that well. I'll put some pictures up for you guys. But this was my first original tarot deck I got in 1989. And I got it in Texas. I moved from New Mexico, where I worked on a reservation, an Indian reservation, as one of my thesis as a therapist. And then also, as you said, I did a lot of feasts and special occasions with them. And so I just really felt aligned with that spirituality. And I want to say it is because of the earth element and the cycles and being aware of the seasons and all our relations, the trees, the rocks, the earth, the plants, and so forth. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys. And I know David has his tarot decks he uses. Now, so maybe we should talk a little about tarot now, since this is about the time you got into it.
It is. It's 2000. I'm trying to remember the exact year. It kind of, when I was involved heavily in the Gothic community, there was a guy who published a magazine called Dark Realms. And he and I developed a relationship. He's actually reviewed my book, my novel. He was one of the first people ever to do that, which I really appreciated. And he sent me, he's a brilliant artist, and he sent me his tarot and asked me to look at it and review it. And I had really not experimented with tarot prior to that. So when I started looking at the cards, and I started to experience them, I realized here's something really special. I always felt that the Bible, the scripture, was special. I felt it was divine. But when I started to get into the tarot and explore the meanings of the tarot, it's divine in a different way. The scripture is a written book, and you can read a sentence and think about it and meditate on that sentence. The tarot is visual, and it speaks more directly to the subconscious mind.
Yes.
But it's in my opinion, it's no less divine. Mm-hmm. I think it's of divine origin. It's an amazing thing, and really it was his tarot that opened me up to the world. I moved past his tarot. I forget what his tarot is called exactly, but it was really made for a darker community, and it's very dark in colors and very dark in presentation. And when I started to study the tarot, of course you go to Rider-Waite immediately,
right.
And then you move out from there. And today I use the Hanson-Roberts, which is it's kind of a version of the Rider-Waite, but it's a little more Renaissance, for lack of a better word.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a pretty deck. But what I like about the deck is there's the colors in the background, what goes on in the background, the symbolism embedded in it, the richness of the illustrations. It's a beautiful deck to use if you're an intuitive reader.
Well, show us your deck. Let's see some pictures here.
First of all, the bag is
I love
something
that
I
bag.
picked up on Etsy. I picked it up on Etsy, and the maker,
nice.
I wish I could remember her name because I'd love to give her a plug. She's done a lot of custom work for me.
It's gorgeous. Does she specialize in making bags for
she does.
tools?
She makes bags. And the thing is, everything I use or everything I do, I try to do with intention.
You guys, listen up here. This is really important. And when you say that, David, what does that mean to you? And you do everything with intention.
That means you understand what your purpose is or what the purpose is in doing it. And when you create it or when you do it, you have that purpose in mind. The person who makes these bags understands what intention means, and she makes bags with intention. So when you get them, you're not just getting a bag. You're getting something that was made by someone who put something into it that
love,
that
care, creativity, energy, respect. Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So that's what I mean by intention. And intention is important whether you're talking about the liturgy of a service or you're talking about your daily life. It's important to be intentional because you're creating your world. So,
all the time.
Yes. So the more intentional you are in creating that, the more peace, love, joy that you're going to experience. So this is my deck right here. This is Hanson-Roberts. Let me see if I can hold that up a little closer.
Oh yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe a few. This is the Page of Wands. I don't know how familiar you are with other decks.
Yeah. No. Yes, I am familiar. It's really pretty.
It's very pretty.
I like the colors. I like the rich colors.
I have a lot of decks. I have probably as many decks as I have Ouija boards. So that's quite a few.
Oh, see, I know. Okay, listen, I have 21 Ouija boards, but I have only 10 decks of tarot.
I've got an entire cabinet full of decks.
That's awesome.
Here we go.
Oh, the lovers. That's beautiful. You guys, David is a tarot reader. He does this. He does this. Is one of the businesses he does. And I'm going to put links to his websites below because he's got some beautiful websites, by the way.
tarotbydavid.com.
That's it.
Is my tarot site, and but Hanson Roberts is the deck I use the most because I think it is so gorgeous, and
it's very nice.
The colors in the background speak to you about what's going on in the card, the symbolism, the expressions on the people's faces. All of that really contributes to an intuitive reading, which I like to do. And so I prefer that particular deck.
Well, now you mentioned to me before we started taping today, we were talking earlier about one of your students. You want to share that story with the deck and how she was really struggling with learning to read it intuitively?
Well, I think there's two kinds of readers and maybe two kinds of people in the world, really. And I think that a person who approaches tarot reading with too rigid a definition of what is and what is not the meaning of a card is going to struggle as a reader. And what she did was, another debate in reading is, do you read reversals? In other words, you look at that card,
right.
Do you read it that way or do you read it this way?
Yes.
And is there a difference in meaning? Well, what she did was, she literally typed along the margin the meaning of the card, both right side up and upside down or reversed. So that no matter what card she laid, if she was using her deck, she would just read what she had written, and that became the meaning.
Right.
And the problem with that is when you're reading the tarot, especially when you're reading for someone else, there's a synergy. There's a coming together of energies between you and the sitter and the cards. And if you're too rigid about what a card means, you're going to miss the opportunity entirely. So you really have to allow the card to speak to your subconscious mind, process that, and bring it out in the context of the reading to allow for a unique reading or a unique definition in that particular setting. This is one of the reasons why I enjoy internet readings. I like doing readings in chat rooms because my sitter can't see the card.
Good point. Wow.
Yeah,
great.
When sitters look at the card, they almost immediately get an impression of their own. And then they'll say, oh, that's not what that card means, or I'm getting something else. And that's fine. But most of the time, or sometimes at least, a reading I'm giving someone has almost nothing to do with what is physically on the card.
Right.
The card's stimulating. The card is a jumping point. But I'm not rigidly holding on to, oh, this is the high priestess, and therefore this is what it means.
Yeah, you guys really hear this now, because David is an intuitive reader. He's also a medium, so he has that ability to work with his mind, his imagination, imaginal realms, and he gets, I'm assuming how this works for you, because this is how it works for me too, when I say intuition or being empathic, I'll get some kind of like a picture or an image or a thought, or I get a lot of feelings, very visceral, and then I just say what I'm feeling. Is this what you mean by when you're doing intuitive reading?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You have to be open to all the different sensory input.
Great.
And whether that's coming by feeling, or whether it's coming by a clairvoyant image, or however you're getting that information. Now, of course, you have to be cautious about coloring. In other words, allowing your own thoughts and opinions to influence. But that's a discipline that gets weeded out in time.
Yeah, I agree.
The tarot is like Ouija. It's like a pendulum. It's like any other thing. It's to best be used, it needs to be part of your intuition, as opposed to the cognitive skill of this is a strict
right. That's too left brain. You got to be more right brain and artistic and flowing and feeling, and we talk a lot about that on here when you work with the board. So let's talk a little bit about your path into spirituality and how that worked with you with the Ouija board, how that came into the picture, and Lilydale.
Ouija for me has always been a fascination. My first experience with the Ouija board was during a Christmas. It might have been 66 or 67. So it was an early board.
He's been using it longer than me, you guys.
My cousin got one for Christmas, and we sat at the base of her stairs in a row home in Baltimore with our fingers on the planchette, watching it go all over the place, trying to remember the letters that were coming up. We had a wonderful time with it. It was a great experience. But today, what does the board mean for me today?
I gotta ask you the question before you go on there. I want to hear that. But interesting, here you were in a Lutheran family, and you were doing the Ouija board. Nobody was afraid that you'd get possessed?
Well, this was 1966 or 67.
So you guys remember this now. There wasn't all that fear until about 73 with the Exorcist movie, or 71 when the book came out. So it was like a normal thing for you to go to church the next day and then do the Ouija board?
Yeah, it was.
I got my board on Christmas too. Santa Claus brought it to me.
Right. I mean, I think, I can't prove this, but I think that if you go back prior to The Exorcist, you have a different experience with the board. And if you look at the Norman Rockwell painting, famous Norman Rockwell painting, that's a fun painting. Those people in that image are having a great time. The boy is kind of fooling around with it.
He's kind of flirting. He's courting this woman.
But it's a whole different environment, I think, prior to the Exorcist influence. And of course, I happened to become a Christian 74, 75. So it was around that period. And there was, within the charismatic Pentecostal community, there was a huge an unprecedented fear of the demonic.
Yes.
That has tapered out since then. But you had itinerant ministers going around casting demons out of people. And I think all of this came out of that film.
I agree. That's when you start seeing all these exorcisms. And so David, how did you, when you were doing the Pentecostal part, we're jumping around here a little bit, you guys, that's normal. What did you think of the Ouija board at that time? Did you think all of a sudden bad Ouija, or were you okay with the Ouija still?
No, in 1974, 75, the late 70s, the Pentecostal charismatic churches were having things they called Hallelujah festivals. And what they did was they took things that they felt were unholy, which would include Ouija boards, which would include rock records.
Oh, of course.
And they were burning them in the middle of the church parking lot. Oh. And of course, I didn't feel one way or the other, but that's what the church was doing. So that's what we did. We burned stuff.
Did you burn a Ouija board, David?
I didn't, but people did.
Thank you for not.
Yes, people did. But since that time, the board has become a symbol for me.
Well, tell us about that a little bit, because you guys, he collects them, doesn't really use them, because he has other tools he uses.
I do. Martin Luther, back in the Reformation, he championed an idea called the priesthood of the believer. And what he meant by that was, you don't need to rely on a priest, because you are your own priest. And to me, the Ouija board represents that. In the later part of the 19th century, again, I'm a devoted spiritualist, so I don't want this to sound critical of spiritualism, but in the later part of the 19th century, people were beginning to feel somewhat dependent on mediums for spirit communication.
Right.
Along comes Ouija, and all of a sudden, people are saying, wait a minute, we can do this. And to me, the board evokes so much emotion, even today, that I think is extremely positive. Even though people may not see it as positive, it evokes a sense of awe. It evokes a sense of the other world. And most especially, it evokes a sense of, I can do this if I want to. And so, to me, it's a symbol that says, you can do this.
What is this?
Not,
what is this? What's the this?
This means spirit communication.
You can have that direct relationship. You guys, the board is just a tool. The board does not do it. You do it. Right, David?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But for me, it's a symbol that says that. The minute I hold a board up, it's almost like, whoa, that's the doorway, right? There's a doorway there, and I can choose to step through that or not. And whether or not you use the board, to me, it symbolizes that freedom.
Oh, well said. I so concur. And that's why I have the boards hanging up all over my house. I have on my coffee table. I have one right here. I always have boards with me because, you guys, I feel the same way. This represents the unlimited, limitless possibilities to life, to living, to existence, the unseen realms. David, we had never talked about it on that level before. So it's really, I got to tell you, I'm just so touched and so gleeful to hear you talk about it on those levels. I knew David was very positive about the board, and that's one of the reasons why we connected and remained friends after we connected. Do you want to show some of your boards now? Because you've got some. He has some really cool old boards. I
gotta pull my notes in here so I tell you the right dates on these things. I had the canard right here. This is this board is one of the earlier boards.
Is that your 1891 board?
Yes.
You guys, Canard, it was made by Charles Canard Novelty Company. Everybody thinks it was William Fuld. It was not. William Fuld was a varnisher at the company, but Charles Canard was one of the main owners.
Right.
That's beautiful. You guys, I have an 1892. That's an 1891. You can tell the year it is because the way the boards in the back are. That's
exactly. That's why I flipped it over, so you could see that strip.
That is in such great
That is 1891.
God, that's old, you guys.
So it's just before the turn of the century. And then you move into a little bit later period of time. I think this is 1911.
I was saying 10 because I want to like that too. It's your 10, 11, right around that era.
10, 11.
That's a board. Do you know Betty White and Stuart White who wrote the Invisibles?
Yes.
Okay, that's the board they were using. That era of board.
That book is a required reading in the Morris Pratt Institute.
Is it the Invisibles or the Betty White book?
Yes, both.
Okay, and I'll put the names down below, you guys. And these books, we're going to talk about some more of the Ouija board books to read. But that book is really good because it gets into spirit communication. She started with the Ouija board one time, and then she went into this whole laying down and could speak. The spirits spoke through her, and her husband wrote it down. It's a fascinating read. Fantastic, yes.
They are. It's amazing what people have brought through. Jane Roberts in more contemporary times.
Yes.
But it's wonderful stuff. This one is, you can see the face on the moon at this point.
Oh, yeah, it was starting to appear, huh?
Right, the face on the moon. I think this is, what year 20s? Is this? 1938?
Oh, no, a little bit older.
No.
Okay, 38.
Yeah, 1920, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking 20s as well. I don't have one with the face on it, but I like boards. I read all about them.
A little bit later, this I believe is 1938, and that's when the seance at the bottom begins to appear.
Oh, the hands, you guys. Right, down, yes.
Right. But still up here, the moon still this way.
No, that's a William Fuld board, right?
This is a William Fuld board, yes.
Okay, then Fuld eventually took it over in 1919. He took over the company. And
you can see his name right there.
There you go. Was that Salem?
William Fuld, Baltimore, Maryland.
They were first made in Baltimore, you guys, and later on they were made in Salem.
Baltimore, yes. He made them in Baltimore. It wasn't until 1966 that they moved up to Salem. Now, I did bring this board. This was made in 1967. Oh. This is a Parker Brothers board. This is wood. Nice. Most people don't know that Parker Brothers made a wooden board. They did in 1967, and you can see the finish on that. It's a beautiful board. It's very slick. But I don't know why they did it, but they decided to make a wooden board in 1967.
Well, I'll tell you what, they purchased from William Fuld in 1966. In 1967, that board outsold Monopoly, and they probably made it wood because it was already wooden, but then they went and started making masonite. And my board from 1973 is a masonite board. I got to get one of those boards because that's closer to the year I was born.
Yeah. Those are difficult to find these days.
Oh, if you see one, David, let me know.
I do have some boards back here if you're interested. They're not William Fuld.
But you know what? I am interested in those because one of the things that David and I talked about, he loves collecting them because of the beautiful artistry to them. So yes, let's see some of your artistic boards.
Well, this one is a commercial board, meaning I like handmade boards because, again, there's the issue of intention. But
yes.
I'm absolutely fanatical about the Victorian period, and so Vintage Paranormal is devoted to what went on in the Victorian period. And of course, I love the Victorian Trading Company. And this is the board produced by the Victorian Trading Company.
Oh, I know that board. That's gorgeous.
Yeah. It's an absolutely gorgeous board. It's extremely slick. It's like glass. It's a wonderful finish. The criticism I would make of this board is the planchette that comes with it. It's kind of backwards.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't work really well on the board?
No, the pointer, there's a hole at the wide end, and then there's a pointer at the opposite end. So it's a little confusing.
That's confusing.
But it is. But that is a gorgeous board, and I love it. Now
it's nice.
This came from a maker in Russia.
Oh, whoa! I have not seen one like that. I've seen round, but not like that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful board. I had a lot of communication with him. I found him on Etsy, and we corresponded back and forth in writing. And it was a long time coming because when things come out of Russia, they don't travel, Federal Express. But it was a Russian maker that made this, and I just absolutely love that. Look at the finish on that thing.
Beautiful.
It is slick like glass. So that's a beautiful board.
David, do you display your boards, or where do you keep your boards?
Oh, I don't display them.
Oh.
But I do. I keep them I have a trunk that was handed down in the family for generations.
Oh, wow.
And I don't even know how old this thing is, but I believe it traveled from Germany with my family at the turn of the century.
Wow.
So I actually keep my boards at least my best boards are in that particular trunk, and then I have other trunks to keep the other boards. I've got probably 150 boards.
Whoa, he puts my 21 boards to shame.
Yeah. This one here is my favorite maker board, artist board.
Oh my gosh, look at that cat. It's like Halloween, you guys.
That's a single piece of wood.
Fantastic.
It's called the Halloween board.
What's it called?
And it's called the Halloween board.
Oh, I see that on there. Halloween. That's cute.
Yeah, Halloween board. Now, this particular design you can get in other boards, but you can't get a single piece of wood like this. Especially this was, as far as I know, this is a one of a kind.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's actually my favorite board. And I have one other board I wanted to show you. This gentleman made only 3 of these.
Oh.
And I picked up one. The thing is heavy. It's got to weigh.
Oh my gosh, it's thick.
It's thick.
Oh, I see. He did the old board, kind of remade it.
He did. What he wanted to do, he wanted the slickest surface possible.
Yeah.
So this is a 1/4-inch pane of glass.
Oh, that's glass on there. That's what those connectors are. I couldn't figure
It
those
is that
were.
he put over the board, and so this is probably the slickest board you can use. And I'm not sure what exactly wood he used, but he wanted to make one for himself as a user board.
Okay.
But he had the materials to make a few others, so I think he made 3 total.
Wow,
and he sold the
nice
other 2.
piece.
I got one, and I'm very happy with it. It's a beautiful piece.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And again, if you care about the art that went into something, the intention, you can feel it on that board. He really cared about what he was doing.
Yeah, I've been very blessed. People make me boards and send them to me every now and then, and it's just out of the blue, and I just feel so blessed by it. And those boards sit in special places in my house, and I gotta say, I can feel the love that came with that board. It's like, I can sense it. I can feel it was made with such care and devotion, and for me, and it's personalized. So yeah, I love that energy. I just want to soak it up, when it comes. It's beautiful. Those are wonderful, wonderful boards. And I'm glad you showed us some of the more artistic ones that are, one of a kind or one of 3. That's really cool. So now pendulums, people use pendulums with Ouija boards sometimes, but you actually have a pendulum board.
I do. I don't collect pendulum boards, but I have maybe 10 of them.
Well, let's see the one you brought today.
Yeah, this is my favorite one right here.
A little closer if you can. Okay, I see symbols. I see a hand. I can't. Heart, maybe. Is that an owl? I can't tell what that is. A bat?
Yes.
Oh,
That's owl.
That is really cool. With the little, is that the Bible in the middle? What book is that?
No, I don't think that's a Bible.
Book of Spells, maybe?
That's probably a Book of Shadows.
Yeah, okay. That is really cool. So now you just hold your pendulum, I'm assuming, just above it in the middle? Right.
You would hold your pendulum over it like that. And then it's very similar to Ouija. It begins to move in the direction of a letter.
Now, do you find, David, when you use it, you take the time to write out the letters, or do you ask more yes-no questions?
I generally ask more yes-no questions. I'll give you an example of how this board came in handy.
Oh, good.
I was meditating on the back porch, and a relative came through, and she had a particular message for me, and I received the message, but I wanted to make sure I was talking that the person I thought it was. Without contacting a medium, I wanted confirmation.
Oh, I love it.
So
okay.
I got out the board and I held the pendulum over the board, and I just simply asked, "Who are you?" And I'm telling you, pendulums usually swing, but in this case, it went like this.
Oh, different directions?
Yeah, it didn't swing. It just pointed, which to me was okay, fair enough.
I love it. So you guys, you can use your pendulum with your Ouija board too. That's interesting. Or you can use it with your own mediumistic skills. You can use it with confirmation. You can use it with your tarot. You can combine tools, you guys. That's what's really cool about this. Yeah, absolutely. And David does this. You combine your tools.
Yeah.
But now you're the walking Ouija board, as I called you earlier. You are the medium, and so that brings us to Lily Dale and your spiritualism studies. This has been this probably sounds like the most important thing to you, is your spiritualism studies, as I'm assuming from what you've been saying.
It really is. Spiritualism, it champions the idea that that the soul is eternal, that the soul continues after death. That they call it the continuity of life, and I love that expression, because what it means is that you're the same person on the other side as you were on this side. It also champions the idea that person, once crossed over, can communicate with the living. There's a book, and I think it really sums up the idea. This is by Alison DuBois.
Oh yes, I know. We know her from a TV show.
Television show called The Medium. She was trained by Anne Gaiman, who is probably the best medium in the world today. And the name of the book, if you look at the title, "We Are Their Heaven." I
so concur with that. I haven't seen that book yet. Wow.
We are their heaven. The argument that she makes in this book is that the people on the other side delight in being a part of our lives. We, that is the living, are their heaven.
You guys hear this, really hear this, because this is what the spirit guides have told me, David. They say, when I talk with anybody that's been passed over, and they always say to me, they go, "We are still living." And the spirit guides say, there is no such thing as death. What you guys call death is what we call life. Life just continues into another existence, other dimensions. And so they, on the other side, we call it the other side for lack of better terms, and in another dimension where our loved ones are, they are truly rooting for us. They're truly supporting us, cheering us on. Are they not?
Exactly. And this book is filled with what you would call evidential stories. In other words, double-blind type stories where she gets information. She doesn't know the people. She doesn't have background on the people. She gets information. She brings it to the information, confirming to them that their loved one is still in their life, that their loved one continues. It's a remarkable book full of that kind of those kinds of stories, and I highly recommend it to get an understanding of that concept.
But that's what spiritualism is about. It's about that we go on living. There is no death. We continue on. That's
the central idea. Yes. Okay. Anything that doesn't support that idea is kind of secondary to spiritualism. But for me, that quest began in 2011 when I went to Lily Dale. And I went to Lily Dale with the purpose of finding evidence myself of the continuity of life. I sat with several mediums while I was there, and some remarkable experiences. One I'd like to share with you. I'm going to be meeting with this medium again in a couple of weeks. She's my favorite. By the way, I haven't seen her since 2011 in Lily Dale, so I'm looking forward to seeing her again.
Oh, wonderful.
There's a link to, by the way, if you go to my website, Vintage Paranormal, the links, There's a couple of I think Konstanza Morningstar and Shirley. Shirley is the medium from Lilydale that I'll be meeting with in a couple of weeks. And when I sat with her, one of the great experiences for me, she began to describe my childhood dog.
Oh.
She said, you have this little, it looks like a golden retriever, but he's the size of a Cocker Spaniel, and he's all golden, and he's sitting at your side, and his name is Sam. And that was the name of my dog. And, you know, and I'd always sensed that there was continuity for animals as well.
Yes.
And there is. And this faithful friend has been at my side ever since.
Oh.
She went on to describe, she says, this was funny. She says, there's a guy here who wants to talk to you. His name is Mike. And I said, I don't know any Mike. So she said, never mind, we'll come back to it. So she went on, we went on to other things. And a little bit later, she comes back and she says, Mike tells me that he lived in Tyrone and that he's on your mother's side of the family. And I said, oh, Uncle Mike.
Oh.
Oh, see, I called him Uncle Mike.
Right. You're not thinking Mike.
That was one word, Uncle Mike.
Right.
So when he identified himself as Mike, you know, I don't know who you are. So anyway, I said, oh, that's Uncle Mike. I said, I love my Uncle Mike. And she said, oh, you know, he's delighted to hear that. He loves you too. And it was a beautiful little family reunion.
Oh. Now, with your dog too.
Yeah. Think about this though. She hasn't met me before. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know I had a Cocker Spaniel when I was a child.
Right.
That was part Golden Retriever. She didn't know that. She didn't know his name. She didn't know I had a relative in Tyrone whose name was Mike.
Right.
This is what we mean by evidential. When a medium that you have not met before has had no opportunity to do research, you sit down and they give you this kind of information. It's to me it's absolute evidence. And I came out of Lilydale convinced that these people were who they claimed to be. What they represent as far as the continuity of life, mediumship, is absolutely true. And from there, I decided to study mediumship.
That's how you got into it then for yourself?
I did.
Wow.
I specifically looked for mediums that were certified through the National Spiritualist Association of Churches.
And you're working on that right now, your mediumship certification, aren't you?
I am. I'm working through the Morris Pratt Institute curriculum, which provides the educational foundation. And then I work with primarily Konstanza Morningstar, who is a medium closer to the DC area,
right,
who sponsors workshops and development circles to develop the skills of mediumship. And when you experience for yourself, I mean, it's one thing to have a medium tell you something, but when you're the medium and you're bringing this information to someone else, it's even more solidifying as far as dispelling any possible doubts in your mind, because spirit people just walk straight up to you.
They do.
They do. They walk right up to you. And you see, I think maybe Anne Gaiman, from what I've read, she sees people much more physically.
Physical. Do you not?
Yes. No, I see them still in this area.
See, that's fine, you guys, and see, but now obviously he's clairaudient too, because you used to hear the voice, and you have seen, you're clairvoyant, because you saw the apparition on the window when you met the spirit guide, but you also see it here. Now, David, I actually see him out here. I see him here, but I literally see them out here too. So I do both, and I can't necessarily control what it is. It's just how it comes for me.
Yeah. No, they're out here, so to speak, but it's still in the mind's eye for me.
But you can feel them out here, but then you get the image here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
See, this is really important. So people will keep asking how to develop their psychic abilities, their empathic abilities, mediumistic abilities, and it's really being in tune with yourself. I always say, call it getting to know who you are within, so you can go, this is my thoughts, these aren't my thoughts, these are images that, my own egoic images, these are the images coming to me for the reading, and you start learning to work with this, and you have to just trust it. What do you want to say about that, David?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's been helpful for me over the last few years is participating in the workshops, participating in the development circles where I have immediate feedback, but I don't always have access to that. So I had my own time, my own daily time, and I will go through months really working on my own. And then if I want to get confirmation, I reach out to a medium that I know and trust. And typically, to give you an example, if I'm hearing a particular message over and over again in my private time, reach out to a medium, and the medium says, this is the person who's presenting themselves to me, and this is the message they're giving. It's the exact same message. That provides some level of confirmation that I'm on the right track. So
that's very good to get that. I think you need validation, especially, you do. We need that validation. And then it gets to the point where after a while, you just really trust it. Right. And then you go, okay. But I think that what's important here is, this is what my spirit guides say. If you want to do this work, they always say, where's your audience? You have to have an audience. And his is through his spirit development groups. I do mine through open message circles and of course this channel too. And as you have an audience, you start sharing this information, it becomes a lot more developed within yourself. So you can just do it like second nature. And truly, you know what? It is second nature. We just kind of hid it all within ourselves. It is second nature to do this work.
Oh, I think so. I think so. We live in a culture that's a little counterintuitive to it.
Right.
Yeah, but once we can break free of that constraint a little bit, then it becomes very easy.
Oh, I love that you said that. This is one of the ways my spirit guides talk about it. They say, see it as that you have the ability to reach into these other realms, and it's like almost like a hose or a channel. And what you do over the years is you've constricted it where we're always here. We just can't flow all the way through you because you've gotten so tight. And so the goal is to always kind of loosen it up so it can start flowing through again. But it's always there. We just sometimes constrict the flow, or sometimes we allow it. And you got to find ways to allow it more and more in your life. And so, as you listen to David talking, sharing all this different stuff he does, you can see there are many different techniques and tools he does use to allow this flow. What would you like to add to that, David? Like any other techniques or something you can share with the group about how to empower themselves to be able to do what is naturally theirs, this gift?
There's two things, really. One is the meditation should not be underestimated. The practice of meditation. I think meditation puts a person in, you might call it vibration, you might call it resonance, but it puts a person in a emotional, mental state where they're more receptive to the intuitive things. So the practice of meditation cannot be underestimated.
Now, when you say meditation, maybe you can take the mysteriousness out of it. What kind of meditation do you recommend? What would be, people go, I can't sit still, my mind can't stop. What do you recommend?
Well, that's the point.
That is the point.
I mean, people can't sit still and their mind can't stop. And that's why if you think about it this way, if you're in a room and there's 50 people in the room and they're all speaking as loud as they can, and you want to hear the one person who's whispering, it requires a bit of discipline to get to that whisper and a bit of discernment. And this is what the purpose of meditation is. Now, meditation is a confusing thing for most because there's so many books and there's so many schools of thought. For me, this is what I like to do. So I'm not proposing this for anyone else, but this is what I like to do. You can go onto YouTube and you can meditation, and what you'll get is different types of guided meditation. I like ocean waves, period. That's it. You like the sound. So interesting. I do. I like the sound, and I like the visual too, but generally I lose the visual quickly because the visual is distracting. So I'll watch the water rushing in, I'll listen to the ocean, and then eventually I shut my eyes and I go to that other place. And the more you go to that other place, the easier it is to get to. And generally, it's not a long time. I mean, there are people that meditate for hours. My meditation might be 15, 20 minutes. That's mine. That's mine, too. Yeah. But at the end of that 15, 20 minutes, you're in a different place. I call it being centered. I'm really in my core, and I feel just so peaceful and calm. And I feel like I can, in a way, although I'm really relaxed, can accomplish anything. Yes. And the light comes on. And by that, I mean, you can look around the room and all of a sudden you can see the spirit people in the room. See you guys? You're in that place where you need to be. Your vibration is where it needs to be. So now your eyes have come open. So it's that's why I say it's essential. The second essential that most mediums will tell you need is the development circle. The problem with the development circle is this. I live in Baltimore. I live in northern Baltimore County. There's not another spiritualist for miles.
Aww.
I belong to a spiritualist church in Falls Church, Virginia, called the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. All the spiritualists go there. The travel time to get there is rough, almost 2 hours one way for me. And to get to Konstanza Morningstar is a good hour and a half because she lives on the DC. Maryland side of DC.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for me to participate in development circles. I do when I can, but when you don't have a development circle, that's when it's really nice to have Skype or a telephone or someone that you can reach, even if they're all the way across the country, to say, this is what I'm sensing or feeling, or let them tell you what the Spirit's saying to them so that you can begin to hone that skill.
That's
so you
great.
can begin to say, okay, this is what I'm really sensing from Spirit versus this is what I'm playing with in my own mind. You can begin to develop that sense of discernment.
I think that is key. You got to practice to get yourself back to this place where you're allowing the flow to come through. I think these are great techniques. The meditation, getting into that space, raising your vibration, resonance. I love that word too, and the way it feels. And then practicing, and then getting that validation back. These are great, great examples, you guys. Now, I know we're coming to a close here on our interview. We could go on, you guys. There's so much more for us to talk about. We had a great conversation before we even turned the recorder on. But what would you like the audience to know? Anything further about the work you do, or any other suggestions you may have for them to develop themselves on these levels we've been talking about today?
Ooh.
Tough questions. I give them to everybody all the time.
Well, it is a tough question, but the answer that comes to mind is follow your intuition. Everybody's intuition is going to lead them in a slightly different direction. And for me to say, I can say this is what I've experienced and this is how I experienced it and this is how I got here to where I am, but that doesn't mean that's going to work for somebody else. So they really need to, and I'll give you an example that comes to mind. I've never been that good at reading runes.
Oh, okay.
I've never been that good at it. Some people are brilliant when you put the stones in front of them. They can do amazing readings with the stones. So it's really about developing in the direction that your guides are leading you, as opposed to what my guides are doing with me. And I know that's frustrating because most people want formulas. Most people want to know that if they do A, B, C, that D is going to result. But in this particular realm that we're talking about, what works for you and what works for me may not work for a person who's watching, and they really need to trust their intuition and go in the direction that they're being led and trust it to get them where they need to go.
Very well said. And David, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on this show. It was a pleasure having you. I loved you, all the things you shared with us. I know the audience will love that too. And you guys, I'm going to put below all the links that we talked about for all of his websites. And David, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been lovely. Thank
Very
you.
welcome. So you guys, listen, there we have it. We listened to a gentleman who had that voice he heard that started him on this odyssey to explore spirituality in many different ways, many different facets, and it was all very beautiful. And you can see how it all came full circle. Things that may not have seemed would work together, which was his own unique path, came together beautifully for him. And so I love what David said when he says, follow your intuition, follow where it is you feel you need to go with this path, and know that your path is always going to be the right path. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was Creative Visions TV, and I'm your host, Karen Dahlman. See you real soon.